responsibility off of us as a society around treatment, around more effective medication, so that if you're, it's not a question of choosing between meds and choosing between your art, right? Because there is a real cognitive effect to the types of medications I'm on, the types of medications that a lot of people take to, just stay firmly planted. So that's the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause and kind of talking more about that connection between madness and genius, but I believe it's absolutely there.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of times that can be a very difficult conversation, because I know just within the minority community there's a lot of aversion sometimes to therapy and to certain drugs. It's like I know there's sometimes aversion to Ritalin and things of that nature, because sometimes people are wondering if it's not over prescribed. Like you just said, you're the mother of a 3-year-old, and as the child grows, if that child becomes hyperactive, do you ever have those concerns or fears that some of what you went through, they might wind up going through if they wind up being hyperactive, as opposed to just being a what others might consider a need to have Ritalin? And that's just one drug that I'm mentioning at that time.
Yeah, I think it really is. I have a lot of prayer over my son around. He's kind of gotten a rough bloodstream on both sides, but I think it really is something on case-by-case basis that you have to. Each individual person dealing with this really has to make their own decision. And if I were not a 41-year-old single mom, I may not be on, the medication regimen that I am. My stability is more important to me than anything else. But that's my choice, and someone else might make a different choice. Both are completely valid, and we, I think, need to validate all of those choices and continue to try and improve what is available to other people. I do think as a whole we can be over-medicated in this country, and we'll see in terms of Malachi when time comes around for him, but I would certainly think I would take the more conservative approach toward medication.
Yeah, definitely. Because one of the other things, and just to change the topic a little bit, but not totally, that I've always been admired of you is that, we talk about people being the creative side, left brain, and people being a little bit more analytical, right brain. But if I remember correctly, your 9-to-5 job is one that is totally the opposite of the creative side. It is a very analytical job that you do on your 9-to-5. So you seem to be one of those rare individuals that are able to go on both sides, from what I can understand. If you want to talk a little bit about what the 9-to-5 job is, but I know that it's one that it definitely doesn't seem to be as creative and left brain oriented as what you do when you're writing.
Yes, it's kind of interesting. I always studied literature, my master's in literature, that kind of thing. But as I've gotten older, I've gotten really pulled toward math, which is something I never thought I would say in a million years. But so I'm like right now, I've just moved into more executive roles, but I've been a business intelligence analyst for a very long time, which is, taking in all kinds of numbers and reports and different research and just kind of running it through your brain and saying these are things that are important or the things that we need to care about or, will predict trends and that kind of thing. So it's a fascinating exercise, and I really, really do enjoy it. I think there are, the more I kind of move along now and get to know people, there are a lot of people, though, that have that kind of math or science and artistic connection. I have an awesome data scientist who is a great musician. I'm just thinking about some of the local poets. Millie is, a math teacher. There is something about these different parts of the brain when they're able to kind of fire and sync. You have some really interesting and novel things that come out of it. It's essentially math is just a different language. It's all about storytelling. It's all about analysis. And whether it's numbers or letters and words, that it's the same kind of, thought process that happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of my people that I have a great deal of respect for, he was on the show earlier in the terms of, like, I think sometime last year, or it might have been earlier, either last year or earlier this year, but that's Daryl Stover, who's definitely got a science background, but who is also a poet. He doesn't do as much with the slam poetry community because there are those people that are big fans of slam poetry, and there's others that are fans of other styles of poetry, and I think his is that just more of a storytelling and less of a competitive poetry kind of thing. So, but he's definitely had that science background as well, and has been here. And one thing is, he's had various jobs. I'm not sure whether he's with the North Carolina Arts Council now or which one he's with, but he definitely has a strong science background and has gone to school in Maryland. So you're right. There are a lot of people that have that science background. And like I said earlier, my dad is an artist, but a photographer and does some other arts. But he also is a big fan of science and has had some science background. So I would agree that has been going on for a number of generations. And you're right, there is a little bit of those parallels between what goes on what people consider right brain and what some people might consider more left brain. Now, one of your other points, I'm going to do another one that I was a big fan of, just because I agree with this, that there are a lot of people that folks might consider prophets that are in our midst, but we don't always give them the respect that we should give them, even though they might be giving us some very prophetic words. So if you tell us a little bit about what prophets was about and how that came about.
Sure. I really like that piece. I'm glad you asked about that. So this was one I wrote actually at Iowa at the Individual World Poetry Slam in 2015. I was there for Bold City. I was like 7 months pregnant at the time. And it's just a tough time. But it was just this kind of raw reaction to honestly, audiences and judges, and just kind of, I think at that point I was moving toward, maybe I'm not, Poetry Slam isn't necessarily the right thing for me, and that competition was kind of part of me in discovering it. So it was really addressed, the prophets being kind of the fellow poets that were there with me and sharing that experience, and not necessarily always receiving a reception that I think was appropriate for the words that they were offering. So that's kind of how it came about. Right. So prophets. There are prophets in our midst here. Can you hear their birth shrieks? Scales fall from freshly excavated third eyes. Tongues are loosed and quiver like seismograph needles. Forged instruments of surgical precision. Sinews that will sew sutures across our fault lines. Weave warnings and wisdoms into reed baskets. Salvation swaddled alongside salivary glands. There are prophets in our midst here. Do you hear them calling us conscious? They spit their sermons at cracked sidewalks from unshaven dishevel. Those who commute daily with the divine are pursued mercilessly by demons, but we must not confuse shadows for the absence of light. One cannot be illuminated without the other. Our prophets bear bodies like bombed-out bus shelters here. Do you see the support beams sagging? Inadequate way stations between this dirt path destination, the next. Rib cages are empty lockers with lost combinations. Vacated space prepared for more pressing commitments than hungry heart and pulsing entrails. The state of man in hunger is to hear his gut more than God. That capital T truth cannot stand here. There are prophets cast under our feet here. Do you hear their bones crying? They rest in mugshot coffins and papier-mâché prisons. For us, they have already passed into silence of metal clanging amnesia, but breath lingers in lungs, penned up in calcified tombstone sternums, while prophecies linger in life sentences here. We kill our prophets here. We maim our prophets here. We imprison our prophets here. We christen our prophets madness here. We are blind ears and dead hearts here. We are all asp and ash, bitten and blazing blasphemy here. We have confused ourselves for our own holiest of holies here. We are false poets in rooms full of empty bookshelves here. We preach to choirs of fellow fallen archangels here. We are penless authors of our own apocalypse here. We deserve what we get here.
Wow. So
I'm out of practice, Mark.
That's right. You're still doing a great job, though. You mentioned earlier that you were surprised by the North Carolina poetry scene, like coming from New York, that's that rich scene there. What else about the creative community of North Carolina when you first moved here surprised you? What were some of the things that you were not expecting to have here in our North Carolina creative community that you did get, or what were some of the things that you were thinking you might get that you did not get?
Nothing on the latter side, I have to say, honestly. I think I was, the music scene's amazing, the original music scene. I'm not as much of a music person, which I almost hate that because it is such an incredibly rich scene here. Article is just unbelievable. I mean, where else are you going to do that, right? It only makes sense in Durham. So just, seeing that festival get started and birthed and where it is in such a short period of time, I mean, that is kind of the alchemy of this area. ADF and the different museums. You mentioned Nasher with your father is one of my favorite places in the world to go, and just the literary scene here is pretty remarkable. I've obviously spent a lot of time on the spoken word and poetry slam side, but the fiction that's being written, the journalism that goes on. I mean, it's just an incredibly rich cultural area, and it was my own ignorance that made me think anything else. But yeah, from the time I got down here, and then you have the schools as well around Duke and UNC of just incredible offerings of lectures and series, and again with some of the arts that are being presented, it's just a remarkable area for artistic, for cultural, for intellectual development. I'm so excited to be able to have a family here and to be able to expose my son to all of these incredible resources.
And it also tends to be an area that's very rich with support for various parts of the culture. Because, I mean, when I think of, like, the arts scene here in North Carolina, and I can't speak for New York, but I know in a lot of scenes it's very much male-dominated, and I would even argue white male-dominated. But a lot of our leadership in our arts community around here is definitely being run by some very powerful and very innovative ladies. And we're also finding some people that are even in other lifestyles that are also part of our leadership and everything, whereas I don't know that all the societies throughout America have that same kind of richness. But North Carolina has always had, and particularly Durham, seems to have a lot of support for women being put in charge, and or some of our people out of the LGBT community being put in charge and not being questioned because of whatever their role is in life.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think the other thing that's so impressive to me about the artists here, and you mentioned Monica Day a little bit earlier, of just the commitment of artists and to the arts community as a whole to serve the needs of the community writ large, right? So Monica Day with Speak Up, Stand Up, Speak Out, NC, and the incredible work she does around domestic violence. I had the opportunity to just do a small workshop for some of their women about a month back, some of the young girls in her summer camp. I mean, but she's running summer camp. She has after-school programs. She's, just did entire conference on the Me Too movement, and just incredible kind of force of nature, right, and so committed to the art scene, but to this area of just tremendous need in our culture. I love, there's a group on Chapel Hill called Hidden Voices with Lyndon Harris, and they're just a remarkable organization. She's a tremendous writer, and they take on different projects and bring multimedia, multi-arts presentations to